Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. We're grateful that you can join us for another week.
We certainly are.
And we're very excited today. We have Penelope Holt with us. She was born and educated in England and now lives in New York. She is a novelist, playwright, business writer, and marketing executive whose work has been performed at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, York Arts Center, and New York's American Folk Theater. In addition to writing fiction, The Angel Scroll and The Apple, based on the controversial Herman Rosenblatt Holocaust romance, Holt is a prolific writer, editor, and co-author of nonfiction, including Singing God's Work, The Story of the Harlem Gospel Choir, Emotional Intelligence at Work, and many other works. She is married and has 2 children. So welcome. We're very, very excited to have you on our podcast.
We sure are.
And thank you for inviting me.
So,
For a nice visit.
yes, I think it really will be. And so can you tell us and our followers how you kind of got into writing and what spurred your passion for writing books?
Reading.
Yes.
And when I was in England, my mother ran a little shop in front of a mill. And she'd get up very early, and because all the mill workers would come, and she'd sell them sandwiches and chewing gum and cigarettes. And then the mill closed, and so the shop closed. And it was in kind of that, it sort of deserted at that point. And we were alone. But I had one sister at home, but she was bobbing in and out. Anyway, long story short, I couldn't enroll for school the first year. I couldn't get a place, so I missed. So she just kept me occupied with books and learning to read and reading to me. And then she'd take me to the library. And that's like the vivid memory that I have of the stories. I remember Peter Pan and Robinson Crusoe and Alice in Wonderland. And she'd read to me Jungle Book. And it was just, when you're a kid, and you're alone, it just makes such a big impact. And there's a saying that readers are born on the laps of their mothers, right? So I just love reading. And then when you read and you read all these great stories, then the next thing is, I want to be able to tell stories like that. And then if you read in the greats like the Bronte sisters and Charles Dickens and Tolstoy, you think, oh, I could never write something that good. But, if you've got the urge, you've got the itch and you need to scratch it. So I started writing really the time I could hold a crayon. That's all I ever wanted to do. Was write. And I think most people, if you've got that passion for something, one way or another, you're going to get there, because you just stick with it, because it means, whether you're good or bad or indifferent at it, you're just going to stick with it because you have to do it.
Yeah. So did you have a favorite novel as a teenager, as a young woman that really inspired you?
I did, and it's funny, it's still my favorite, but I think I don't know if you have that experience where you read a book at a point in your life where it means so much to you. And then, as you get older, you may not have chosen that book, but it just makes such an impression. The novels of Thomas Hardy, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, they've turned a few of them into movies. Tess of the D'Urbervilles and Far from the Madding Crowd and The Mayor of Castor Bridge, Return of the Day. He was a self-taught writer. He always wanted to go to Oxford University, but he was working class. He was a stonemason. In fact, he used to work on the buildings in Oxford, and he'd see the students go, and he longed to go and get that education, but he couldn't because he was a working man. He worked with his hands, but he had this prodigious intelligence, and he had this gift for creative writing. And so literally he schooled himself. He was self-taught, and he just sat down and he wrote these novels that are largely, believed to be some of the greatest novels of the 19th century. And it was the shift from when people were leaving the countryside to go work in the cities, in the factories for the Industrial Revolution. And it's sort of that idyllic country life with music and pastures and pastoral and milkmaids and, going into like the harsh conditions of the mills and industry and smokestacks and cities. So he just tells a really, really good story. And they tend to be tragic and ironic. Like the two lovers pass each other on the road, or one goes to they're supposed to meet, but one goes to the wrong place and everything gets thwarted. So yeah, to this day, he's my favorite to this day. Yeah.
Nice. Very nice. Yes. I have to say, I was very lucky because as a child, my mother read to us lots. And as we were younger children, like she'd read The Lord of the Rings at night to my brother and I. And so, yeah, it inspired me. And so I love reading. And I pass that on to my children as well. So my oldest is a reader, youngest, not so much. But, I think you follow and do what inspires you. And I've written
Yeah.
some poetry. That's about my level of writing. But we start somewhere, right? So,
And because I read to my son every night. My son is an amazing reader. I mean, he's grown now. And yeah, it's really a nice moment when they start referring books to you.
yes.
When he was growing up, I'd say, read this, read that, read that. I think you didn't. And then now he's at the point where he's like, Mom, you should read this. But when he was doing his high school English, I would used to read along with him, the reading list.
Oh,
And
nice.
I'd read most of it anyway, but I went back and read it just because at that age, they're sort of doing their own thing. So you're looking for ways that you can have a conversation with them and that's sort of neutral, because they become touchy, don't they? They don't want to talk about this something like,
Yeah.
how about that Ernest Hemingway book? What did you think? So, but I love being read to, and I love reading, and I love reading to my kids, and I love to see him read. And it's so funny because I really like the digital now. I mean, I like the paperbacks, but just the room that they take up. But he loves paper books. In fact, he goes into New York and they have the used books stalls, all over.
Yeah.
That's getting better everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And he brings them home. They put them in these lovely, like crisp, see-through, clear plastic. And he brings them home. But he loves, like, he's got them all stacked in little towers. He loves the paper books. But I like Audible. I go walking.
Mhm.
You're supposed to walk and just our attention spans are so bad now, right? And they say, walk, be in nature. But I like to put the earbuds on and listen to the listen while
Yeah.
I'm walking.
Yeah. I have started listening because I am very much I love my books, but I think there is a place for the digitals when you're traveling, when you in different situations. And Audible, I was like, in the beginning, I was like, really? Like, how lazy can you be that you're going to listen to a book? And I have now retracted that thought because I listen to it all the time on my way to work because it's a great time when there are these books that I want to read and get this information to get it when I'm just traveling around,
Yeah,
or
so
like you
great.
said, walking and
Yeah, if you're driving and you can listen. And because I write so much, both for business, for business and creative writing, my eyes strain because I'm constantly in front of a computer. And sometimes I want to read, but I fall asleep. I've got my eyes are tired. And so I like listening. And last year I was kind of late to it, but there's a book by Amor Towles called A Gentleman in Moscow.
Mhm.
Moscow, pronounce it. And the chap who read it, oh, he had the best voice. The narration.
Yeah, some of them do.
I went looking for books that he was reading because he was just half of the experience. But I love it. It was one of those books where you're just sad when it comes to an end because it's. But I noticed they did a limited series on Showtime. They cut it into 8 episodes. The Gentleman in Moscow.
Okay.
So that was that. But I really and then by the same token, a bad narrator can ruin the book for you.
Yes, 100%.
Oh yeah. You just have a hard time getting into it completely. It's like, oh no.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you.
I can't listen for 8
You do-
hours.
You do romance novels, right?
Yeah, I've just started a series completely opposite end of the Angel Scroll, which is sort of a spiritual journey. But I've just there's such a demand for romance novels. They're a good, quick escape read. So I've started a series called Women Who Want, and the first one is called Polly Wants a Lover.
Oh, nice.
And it started out kind of as a joke, the parrot, the Polly wants a cracker. And then so the first one in the series is Polly Wants a Lover, and I'm working on the second one, which is Sadie Wants a Second Chance. So yeah, Inkbell is publishing that in January of 2025, and I'm sort of I'm excited to get into that. It's such The Apple, which was about the Holocaust, was a very difficult book to research and write. Harlem Gospel book was a lot of fun. The Angel Scroll was a lot of research into spiritual sacred places in Jerusalem, Glastonbury, and Rome. And I enjoyed it. But it was just more of an effort. But the romance books are just, they're just, yeah.
So
And anyone knows about romance. Everyone knows about romance, right? Or if we haven't had that experience, we've got a girlfriend who's had it. So
that's true. So would you say you're a romantic?
Yeah, well, I think I'm a believer in love all the way around, anywhere you can get it. I mean, all of the most important things to me have been love relationships, marriage, my children, my parents, my sisters, my friends. Everything that's important to me is based on relationships, which are based on love, really.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So do you think that with your writing and things like that, there's such that love because of your reading and things like that, that became that relationship for you too on a more business sense, creativity, those kind of things?
you mean what you say
Like a
that
love,
again?
like a love, like almost like a love relationship to writing these books and
Oh,
creating
yeah.
for people.
Yeah, because I think I'm fascinated by psychology and what makes people tick and human experiences.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get to explore that in writing. You get to invent characters that were based on people that you know or pieces of yourself. So yeah, I love to write. It's really a passion for me. I really enjoy it.
So
Yeah.
what inspired you then to write the Angel Scrolls, and was part of it, like we were talking before we got on about your painting and things like that? And so I know that there's the three paintings in there where they're searching. Was that part of what inspired you, was your love for painting, or was it something else?
Well, I've said it quite a few times, but when I read the Da Vinci Code, and it's got, it's like 2000 now, I can't believe it's over
I
20.
know.
I just thought it was such a clever book because I'm fascinated by, you know, um, myth and Bible stories and different spiritual traditions. We were even talking about witchcraft. We've got the Celtic Druids in England. It was an oral tradition. Like there's nothing really written. It came down. They were very, a couple of thousand years ago. And then they merged with Christianity. So it was the Celtic Christianity, but they worshiped the goddess and they wouldn't let go of her. And so if you look at the Celtic churches, Christian churches, they've got the goddess carved into the stonework. So the way because we sort of get our religion and it's very, but if you go back enough in time, they all sort of interweave with one another. So I really love the Da Vinci Code because it took that trip back in time to look at these different religious theories. And the Da Vinci Code was a theory that Jesus was with Mary Magdalene, and there are these three fringe theories. And then they traveled around to Rome and all of the great cathedrals. So it's just had this really sort of superhuman scale. And that really appealed to me. So I thought, oh, I'd like to do something along that line. Then I heard about this Dead Sea Scroll that had been recovered. They thought it was missing and they thought they'd recovered it. At the end, they weren't sure if it was a hoax or not. And then I just thought, oh, that was 1999 that they discovered it. I thought, right on the edge of the millennium. Remember how nervous we all were?
Yeah.
We thought the lights were going to go out and the world was going to go out. And it was, for young people who went there, it was really like it just felt huge, right? Being on the cusp of this new millennium, going from 1999 Prince to 2000. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was this prophecy for the new millennium that these three miraculous paintings would come and like transform, because everybody's fighting over a religion. Then we had the 9/11, and that it'd be very healing. So there's always this fantasy that something will come along and tame all of the anger in the world and the suffering in the world, and just make things. I think that's why the new gospel and the Bible stories are so compelling, because there's these miracles, people from the dead, making the blind see, we all have that fantasy that miracles can happen and all the suffering of the world will be elevated. So, and then the main character is she's been bereaved. Her young husband has died, and she's just heartbroken. And then she starts having visions, and she channels this painting, and she's just like Alice in Wonderland at that point. And then she gets pulled into this hunt for these three paintings to see what happens when you put them together. So I just kept layering on more and more and more of the story. My sister said, there's a lot going on in this book. It was like, it all makes sense to me. I'll just iron it all out. It'll work. I'll knit it all together. And then I started doing all the research, because I was like, right, they're going to go to Jerusalem, and then they're going to go to Glastonbury, which is where the Druids and the Celts, and find out about goddess worship. Then they're going to go to Rome, and look, going all over looking for these paintings, who's doing the paintings. So, but it started out with the Da Vinci Code. I just had never read a book like that, and I thought it was it was a good modern take on some very old and ancient and sacred myths. So and then I kind of did my own thing,
So did you, in your research, did you just research these places, or did you actually go and have those experiences of what the different religions, what the different spirituality things in those places were?
Well, I grew up in England, so I spent quite a bit of time in Europe, because we just hop over the channel. When I was a kid, you used to have to go across the water on the ferries or the hovercraft. And then they built the tunnel under the channel. They call it the channel. Tunnel under the channel. So they call it the channel. High-speed trains that whiz. I think the shortest distance is 12 miles. And I think that the widest is from you go across to Calais is it's like 26 miles.
Wow.
So yeah, I spent time in, so I've been to Rome and Florence and Siena, and they're beautiful places, and they're all marked by cathedrals, because going way back to early Christianity, they just built these massive cathedrals that took centuries to build in some cases. In fact, one of my favorite books is Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth, which is about medieval stonemason, like his family. They go travel, from town to town building cathedrals. It was every big city wanted a cathedral. So you go into these massive basilicas in Rome and Florence and Assisi, where Saint Francis is his original, because he was a very humble man. He was a devoted to the poor and animals, patron saint of animals, I think. And it's this tiny little hovel that he used to live in, and then they built this massive cathedral around it. So you go in, and it's it's massive, and then you make your way down, and then there's this tiny little structure that he actually lived in. So,
oh, that's really cool.
That is on our bucket list, is to get over to Europe and look at those cathedrals. And
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there would be such a feeling being inside of those, just because of the stonework and just because of the
energy,
the spirituality, the energy, that is passed through there.
And they're superhuman, the scale, they're vast. And, they date back to medieval times. When you think about medieval times, they didn't even wash properly. There was And yet they were the architect, like in the Pillars of the Earth, the sophistication of the engineering and the architecture to build these massive superhuman structures, and with the stonework and the carving and the stained glass and the workmanship. I mean, it's otherworldly. We mass produce things now, but you just don't see that kind of artisanal, craftsmanship. And it is truly awe-inspiring. You're awestruck. Like you look up at the ceiling and the pillars, you can't believe it. And the feeling, you feel like you're on sacred ground. And I'll tell you something interesting about the Druids. It's in the book. The word enchanting?
Mm-hmm.
It comes from the Druidic perpetual choirs, the Druids. They would literally walk a space and they would chant 24/7 to enchant the place.
Wow.
Which literally meant they made it into a sacred space with the sound that the constant chanting. And I think when you do that, and we know that sound is a very mystical thing. Some people think it's that the universe came into being because of sound. But can you imagine just like 24/7 walking around and just chanting? And I never knew that. I kind of credit myself with being pretty up on stuff. And I thought, wow, that's what enchanting means. It means you've literally enchanted the space to make it sacred.
Wow.
So
Beautiful. Hey, that's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. And it's really interesting to me when you say that. I just finished listening to this Audible book by Michael Easter, and it was called Scarcity Brain. And so he was talking about his experience going over and living with these monks and how they're very, they have their prayer sessions and their things where they're chanting and things like that. And they're like every day for certain amounts of time. And when you were talking about that, it just made me think of that book because it was like, that was such he just was like in awe of these people because they were doing this and this was just the way they lived their life.
It's interesting too, because I just had to go into a mosque and looking at the building before I went in, like there's so much work in their buildings too, right? And when I got in there, of course, I had to cover my hair and whatnot. But once I got in there, the women were chanting and
Yeah.
singing and the whole time. And then at one point, it changed to the men.
Yeah.
So it was a really good experience. I was really glad I had the chance to experience it and be there for the full day and how they feed each other and how it's all free for them and to do that for each other. It was really quite an experience. I was so glad. But they do that. They chant the whole time and sing. I was there. Really nice. It was actually really nice.
When I was growing up too, in Catholic masses, and the priest will chant, and then the congregation. There's something about chant in the Buddhists. The chanting that they do that low guttural chant I think in almost every faith and spiritual tradition, chanting and singing. Like I know the Buddhists with the sound, they think is the seed, the root sound of the universe. And there's a famous Buddhist teacher that did Shambhala. He came from Tibet to the West, and that's how he would cleanse a space through the chanting. And part of why I wrote the Angel Scroll was she kind of goes on this because she's searching, because she's heartbroken. So she wants to believe in miracles. She wants to believe that she'll see her husband again, which we all do when we lose someone that we love. And then she goes and she finds out about these different faith traditions. Like, what do you think? And what do you think? And why do you think that? I'm very fascinated by that, by how people come to God or their conception of God or higher power or goddess or universe, whatever they want to call it. But that sense of a higher power that makes them be a better person and be focused on the right things in life. And I'm always very interested in, why do you think that? And how did you get there? And how do you sit and do you chant? And so that's a lot of the book is about that. She goes and they've all kind of got an explanation about why she's having these mystical experiences, why she's having these visions, and this painting that she does that's miraculous. It's healing. There's no way she could have painted it. It's too good. It's almost like an old master. And her doctor just thinks that she's got an eye problem. It's the thing, good old materialist.
Yeah.
Everything be explained, scientifically. And the Buddhist thinks one thing, and the Benedictine monk thinks another, and then a goddess, the anthropologist who studies goddess worship, she thinks it's something else. So that's what I wanted to do. I researched all that, and then I wanted the reader to kind of listen to all the different points of view.
Beautiful.
That is beautiful. I can definitely feel what you're saying, because I have always been drawn to the religion in how similar so many religions are at the essence, at some of the things like you say, like chanting, and most of them light candles, and most of them do some sort of incense or those kind of things. And so it's always intriguing to me how similar they are yet different. And I think that's great about your book, because I think it opens up people to be able to say, oh, maybe maybe if I'm struggling and I don't really know where I belong at this moment within my faith, there's these other avenues that maybe I can look at that I didn't know. So I think that's great that you conveyed that in your book.
It really is. People need to know that as well.
Yeah, and I think every religion can, all major religions have a fundamentalist strain, right? Where it gets into I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm good and you're bad, and do it my way or else. And that I think people are called, everybody is doing the best they can, and people are called to do different things, right? For different reasons. But there's a kind of an overlap in religions where no matter what your religion is, if you're not on the extreme end of it, you're sort of, everybody meets in the middle. And I think that too. And that's my goal. And that's what I'm about, right? So the most religions converge around that higher moral, ethical, basically, it says in the book, the Angel Scroll, because they think that the paintings are going to be like a new gospel, so Claire says to the Benedictine, she said, well, what will the paintings teach? And he says, well, Jesus, because he's a Catholic, he's a Benedictine monk, so he's, he comes out of the Christian tradition. He said, well, Jesus only left us with 2 commandments, which was to love God and love one another. And then he said, it's simple, it sounds simple, right? But apparently it's impossible.
So we see in front of us, that's true.
Yeah, it's a simple thing, two simple things: love God and love one another. But we haven't managed to do it yet, have we? So I thought that was, so it's that simple, it's just, if the paintings could make everybody do that, love a God of their understanding and love one another, we'd be in heaven on earth, wouldn't we?
Yes. So it would definitely be some kind of utopia world at that point, really, because it isn't that hard of a thing, but it is. Like,
it is.
I mean, I think that's all our end goal is to get there, or most of us anyways, I think we all come from a good spot in our hearts, most people. So, and I like how you tied in the painting, because I feel like creativity and some of those things really do echo how we can bring that spirituality into life in such an art form, rather it be painting or what it is.
Yeah.
But I love that you kind of conveyed that through the story as well, that, there's that connection to that, and, and what you see in a painting when you look at it, especially if it's an abstract painting, it allows you that creativity and that openness to find what you're looking for.
Yeah, it does. I love abstract too. Love abstract paintings.
Yeah, there's a lot in the book too about your unconscious, and how when you dream at night, it's your unconscious playing, right? You see different, and it all seems very real to you. You're in the middle of Paris and there's a rainstorm and a baguette falls on your head or whatever. Always makes sense in the dream, and it's because it's your unconscious. So when you look out into the world, really your unconscious shapes a lot of what you see. And it was interesting to me that in the Renaissance period, before the printing press, before people could read, the only way they could see the stories of the Bible, I'm talking about Europe now, but in Christianity in Europe, was in the back to the cathedrals and the churches, the beautiful paintings. Michelangelo, the great Renaissance artists, were commissioned by the church, the Sistine Chapel.
Yes.
Their patrons were the church because they were being asked to paint
Yeah.
the church of Jesus and his saints. And that's how it was this very direct experience of, if you look at Michelangelo's, it's called the Pieta. It's a sculpture of Mary. It's in St. Peter's in Rome. And it's sculpted out of a block of Carrara marble. I believe it's Carrara marble. That's usually what he worked with. And it's the Virgin Mary, and she's got the crucified Jesus across her.
Yeah.
And veil, she's wearing a veil, and it's like, God, it's so fine. And his foot, the veins and the tendons, and he's done it out of stone. And you look at it, and it'll break your, it's called the Pieta, the pity.
Yeah.
And you look at it, and it'll break your heart, because it's a mother holding her
Child.
son who's died in the most horrible way.
Yeah.
And you go, how the heck did he chisel that out of a lump of rock? So what you were saying about that the spirituality and the creativity, the creative expression coming through the paint, and he believed in the muse. Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, they believed in the muse, that the muse came from Greek mythology, the nine muses, but the sense that there's a divine inspiration that comes down on to earth and like guided his hand, like lived alongside him, basically, and knocked that bit off and chisel that. So they had that they thought, they thought they had a direct connection to the divine. And so Claire, in the 21st century, she's being divinely guided to do this painting. So I thought it was a nice idea. I mean, there's a precedent for it. We've had that in history. So I was like, well, let's have it again in America and in the 2000s. Let's have a woman do this beautiful thing.
I love it. So, which makes me think of another question, which is,
no,
yeah, right. So, when you were writing this book, then was there at some point in this book where you felt like there was either some divine intervention, or did you learn something that inspired you through this book and creating it?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that, because in writing, they say, are you a plotter or a pantser? And when I write for business, or I co-write a book with someone, I've got to be a plotter, because if you're working with someone else and they may not be a professional writer, but they've got a story to tell, or they've got a book to write, and then you have to frame it all out and do the outline, and we're going to start here and we're going to go through. But when I wrote this book, I was a pantser, and a pantser is the seat of your pants, right? Because I felt that feel like I was waiting to see what would happen next. And I don't know if you call that, I mean, it feels like inspiration, but it may be back to just the power of the unconscious. You read, so like I'm such a big reader, so I've been reading and reading for decades, and I've got all of these interests, and it all kind of goes in there like a tumble dryer, and then I think it just sort of, once you literally begin to channel it, because you start to think along certain lines. Oh, I want I want a miracle, and I want these miraculous paintings, and once you start intentionally thinking about how you want the plot, I think it just sort of starts to come up out of your unconscious, and you don't know where it's coming from. It's I think, I don't know if you've got creative pursuits, but if you're painting or anything, if you involve yourself in a creative outlet, it's like you turn on a piece of yourself and you allow, because in life, like we're at the supermarket, we're pulling the spaghetti off the shelf and folding the clothes, and we're very purposeful, but when you allow that active imagination, that open space for something to happen, then all kinds of things kind of come out of your
You do.
unconscious.
Mhm.
And it feels inspired. It feels very different to your normal pattern of thinking and acting, because you're just creating, like, I know you do full moon rituals, right? So you're creating a space, I presume, for something to come that is not mundane. It's not, well, it's just coming from a spiritual place or an unconscious place or a deeper place,
It does, because
right?
sometimes when you're doing it, words come out of your mouth. You don't even know where they came from, and
Yeah.
but they did, and it inspired the people that were listening to it at the time, right? So yeah, I think that's an inspiration that comes to you, and you get to share it, and
Yeah.
that's what you're doing with your books. I don't know. I've always been very busy with my hands over the year. I liked creativity through my hands,
Yeah.
and so yeah, where does that come from too? Because you go, I can't do that. Next thing you know, you're doing it. So that was cool.
Yeah.
So you're inspired by something that made you do that. I
So
agree.
that's the exact feeling that I'm talking about, is that you just create that opening, you create that space, and then something comes and it feels different. It feels like it's coming from a different place than the you that's stirring the soup on the stove. And I love music. My son's playing the banjo now. I hear him practicing sometimes. I am not musical. I do not have fine motor skills. I can paint, not fine work. I like more abstract things, where I can, you see this Pollock behind me. I was telling you, he'd splatter stuff and he'd get jars and swing paint. But I'm always fascinated. My sister was an amazing seamstress. She could sew anything. Um, I've just got a friend who's visiting from England. Her mum has created this beautiful tree of life with beads. You
Mm,
kind of get it's and one at a time. I was like, is she gone blind? I mean, it's just such fine work. But to your point, some people express it through music or kinetically through their fingers. They potters or painters or
mhm.
sewers or embroidery or um it's just amazing or sculpting. The Buddhists do these mandalas with sand,
Oh, they're
and
beautiful.
then they th throw their hand through them, and they just cast it away, because that's the impermanence of the world,
I know.
that the beautiful
Yeah.
things arise and then they disappear, so they create this beautiful thing and then they just sweep it away.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. That's funny that you should mention that, because I'm very much into signs and synchronicities right now in my life. And so that's funny you should say that, because I just wrote a post the other day that was about that, is when we went to Lilydale, New York, they were there, the Buddhists, and they were making this beautiful
Oh,
mandala with this sand
hour after
and
hour after hour.
intricate and just so beautiful. And at
Yeah.
the end, they carried it down to the lake and let it go to show that impermanence. And I'm just like,
Wow.
wow. Like I was just in awe, because, we both were, because
Yeah.
it's just like,
How can they do
you,
that?
read about it and you hear about it, but when you actually physically see what they went through. So when you said that, I was like, oh, there's a
Plus, they
synchronicity.
chanted too while they were doing it, and
yeah.
just to stand and watch them was wow,
Yeah,
amazing.
Well,
phenomenal.
that's the
Yeah,
symbol is a sign that has got so much meaning packed into it, and
yeah,
so powerful meaning, the symbol. That's why symbols are so powerful. You look at a cross or a Superman or whatever it is, and it's the power of that, all of that meaning that's packed into that symbol hits you.
yeah,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
when symbolic realm, and that's in doing the book too, that's when you get into the symbolic realm and you start to show people things that are symbolic, just by the nature of our DNA and our shared culture and history. And we just it's this, that the meaning hits us, and then you get that feeling of like awe, you're awe inspired.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if there was one final thing that you could leave our followers with, either an inspiration from something you learned in writing your books, or just a final thought, what would it be?
Well, I think with loss, I think to always stay creative. What Claire learns in the book is that the power of when we're kids, we're so curious and creative about life, right? And then all of a sudden we start to what's the word? Calcify, because we stop being curious and we stop being creative, right? Like when you're a kid, you want to ride a bike, you want to do roller skates, you want to paint, you want to do this, and so the way I think is to always be aware that life can give you more. My mother-in-law was Sicilian and she died in her 90s, and she just loved life. And she said, every day I've learned something from every decade, because she went into every decade saying, oh, what's next, and the way Claire gets so, because I think if you just sit there and say, I'm at the end now, I can't think of anything to do, I can't do things, I'm not interested, you calcify. Whereas even if you go through tragedy, or you go through a bankruptcy, or people struggle, or ill health, or you lose somebody, you lose a house, as long as you've got that creativity that says, I can figure something out. I can make something out of my life. I can go in this direction. I can do this. I could get up this morning. I could do this. I could do that. The world's full of possibilities, right? So when you live creatively, even in a small way, you can take a walk and go a different route, or I think that's the lesson of the book, is to sort of triumph by even though when things are dark, to understand that your mind and your spirit is capable of creating a life. And listen, you've got to integrate grief and loss. We all do, right? It's just, I don't care who you are, what life is, just one series of one loss after another. And so I think the name of the game is to create the gains to outweigh the losses.
That's right. Yeah, it's true.
That's a wonderful thought for people, right?
It is.
To know and to appreciate that, just be creative and just see where it goes, and know that there's always something else to look forward to.
Yeah. Get up in the morning, and sometimes we all go through periods where you just feel trapped. You feel boxed in. You feel like your life is crushing you, or circumstances are crushing you. And I think you just have to muster that belief that you'll one step at a time. And one small thing before we finish, it just keeps coming. I just keep thinking about it. I was reading, if you hum, the vagus nerve, which the vagus nerve runs your whole body, and it kind of doesn't control your nervous system, but so whenever you're stressed or anything, you want to kind of through breathing affect your vagus nerve. So I read that when you hum, it's calming, because it's vibrating the vagus nerve. And so we've been talking about chanting, and how the Buddhists chant and the monks chant and the Muslims chant, and kind of just on a very basic level, chanting will relieve your stress for you. So maybe we all need to start chanting, or at least humming.
Yes, agreed.
Good idea.
Agreed.
Good
I
idea.
have heard that many, many times as well. And I think that's a great thing to end this on, because I think that, it's just something so simple that we all have that ability to do, and we'll just create that little tiny shift in our lives. And I think as we shift things in our life, even a tiny bit, we open up space for so much more.
Oh, totally. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
And you're just in just feeling like in a bad spot, just start humming, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just it's the tiniest thing. All you have to do is just get a little bit of momentum to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Right?
Exactly. So can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yes, if you go to penelopeholt.com, and you'll see my books, and then this is the latest one. This is The Flower of Life. It's sacred geometry, and you can get the links to the Kindle book, or if you like paper books.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
If people have book groups, it's now with Zoom, you can drop into a book club if someone's read your book and talk to them, which I love, because people will say, oh, did you mean this and did you mean that? I say, no, actually I didn't, but that's very interesting that you
Yeah, it gives you some food for thought as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, we appreciate you sharing space with us. This has been a delightful hour,
Really has.
and
Yeah.
it's so inspirational to, get out there and do these things to find your path. So, thank you for spending time with us and sharing your time with us and our followers.
Thank you. And I'm glad you brought up synchronicity because that's one of my favorite things. I love the idea that when you're just learning about something or reading about thinking, and then all of a sudden it starts appearing in your life. It's always a really nice message from the universe that it's talking to you.
You
Yeah.
bet. You
It
bet.
really is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes. So thank you so much.
Thank
And we
you.
hope you'll join us again another time, maybe when you write your next one. Well, I guess you've already written it if it's coming out in January. So,
That's totally different, non-spiritual. This
well, we can probably find something to discuss about it and put that word out there that you've got something new. So we appreciate you coming with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
have a great holiday.
Hey, yes, same to you.
Yes, and you as well. And everybody
Okay.
else, we'll see you next time.
You bet.
Bye-bye.